Most of the discussion about health recently has been about COVID-19, but you may not be aware that there's been some new research and developments in the field of lung cancer. Let's take a look and find out more.
There's promising research for those with non-small cell lung cancer. New investigational findings from a premier cancer meeting show potential advances in the fight against the disease. Joining us with more on this latest news is Roy S. Herbst, MD, PhD of Yale Cancer Center and Smilow Cancer Hospital. Dr. Herbst, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So what is non-small cell lung cancer and how prevalent is it?
Well, lung cancer is the #1 cause of cancer death worldwide. In the U.S. alone, we have over 200,000 patients succumb to it each year. And non-small cell lung cancer is the most prevalent type, 85% of cases. And within that, about 10 to 15% of the patients in the U.S. have abnormalities in the epidermal growth factor receptor, which is the target of the molecular therapy I'm going to tell you about today.
So what new data was released surrounding non-small cell lung cancer medical advances at this year's ASCO meeting?
Right, the ASCO meeting, American Society of Clinical Oncology, is our biggest meeting of the year for cancer clinical oncologists like myself. And it was held virtually this year, but I presented one of the plenary presentations called ADORA. This was a large randomized trial in partnership with AstraZeneca that basically took patients with lung cancer, non-small cell lung cancer, with early disease, meaning disease that could be removed by surgery. And that's about 30% of the total. And it took those patients and it treated them with the best chemotherapy available, which is the standard of care. Many of them got chemotherapy. It works a little bit. But despite that, we know that as many as 50 to 70% of these patients will still have refractory disease. It will still come back. So we know that something else was needed. So in this trial, we then randomized the patients to a new targeted therapy that targets epidermal growth factor receptor versus a control, a placebo, because, as I said, there's no other standard of care. And the plan was to give the drug for 3 years, and we looked at recurrence rates. Incredibly, 83% of the patients, less patients had a recurrence in those that got the drug versus the control. So an 83% decrease in recurrent lung cancer, which to someone like myself who takes care of patients all day long, I found that incredible. I expected this to work, but not to that level. And that speaks to the fact that this drug is so well tolerated. It can be given for the full time, and it targets areas where the lung cancer spreads, like the brain, vital organs, the other lung. So really a very important result because it gives us a new practice-changing regimen we can use for patients with this disease.
And how significant are these investigational findings for patients with early-stage disease, in particular in the lung cancer community?
Well, right now we're taking our best biologically targeted drugs, these precision drugs, and we're moving them earlier in disease. And I think it's a huge advance because it gives us, as physicians, an option for the patients. And that's who it matters to most, to take an agent, a pill. They don't have to come in that often. That's important, especially now with COVID. And they can take this pill, and this pill will keep that cancer from recurring. So it speaks to the fact that now we have to make sure we identify this abnormality early. So at the time of surgery, the medical oncologists like myself and the surgeons and the pathologists in a multimodality way, as we do here at a place like Yale, every week we're going to have to look at those cancers, find out who's a candidate for this type of new therapy, and then in the future add that in, because I think it's going to give us a way to keep lung cancer from coming back, keeping patients from having the symptoms that lung cancer can produce.
And how does the scientific development potentially change the landscape overall for testing certain patients with non-small cell lung cancer?
Well, I think it's going to increase testing. So, in the advanced setting, most but not all patients get tested. We have to make sure that every single part of this country and world gets tested because these therapies are active. But now in the earlier stage, the testing has to be included there as well. And I think it will be because the field is changing as well. Epidermal growth factor was the first, but there are now at least 10 different targeted abnormalities that have drugs that can be matched. And the whole goal is to give the right drug to the right patient at the right time, to have the least toxicity but the best efficacy. And that's what we saw in the ADORA trial.
Where can we get more information?
Well, there are many websites. One I would suggest is lvng.com, Living with Lung Cancer. But many sites, including our Yale Cancer Center site, have information.
And do they also provide support?
Absolutely. I think there's so many advocacy groups, support through cancer centers, through advocates. I would say there's the International Association for the Study of Lung Cancer, a great resource there. There are many groups and patient advocates that can work with people and provide them information. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Herbst, for informing us about this. It's really great information I know will help many people.
I hope so. Thank you so much.